Over 4,000 years ago, in the cradle of civilization, ancient Mesopotamia, ruled a king unlike any other. Gilgamesh, the mighty ruler of Uruk, was said to be two-thirds divine and one-third mortal. Feared and revered, he built towering walls, waged wars, and crushed anyone who opposed him. But power breeds arrogance, and the gods had watched long enough. Gilgamesh was not just a warrior, he was a tyrant. His strength made him believe he was above all, even the gods. He ruled Uruk as his playground, seizing what he desired without question. No bride in Uruk wed before first belonging to him, a cruel custom that filled the city with silent suffering. But the gods had seen enough, and they were about to strike back. But the gods would not let such cruelty go unanswered. In the heavens they convened, their voices echoing across the celestial halls. The cries of Uruk's people had reached them, and their judgment was swift. From the divine will, they shaped a being, a rival, an equal, a force meant to tame the wild arrogance of Gilgamesh. From the depths of the untamed wilderness, Enkidu was born, not from the womb of a woman, but from the very earth itself. His body was sculpted by the gods, his skin rough as the land he roamed, his strength rivaling that of the mighty king. He knew no walls, no cities, no laws. He was a creature of nature, running with the beasts, drinking from the rivers, unburdened by the corruption of men. But fate had set his path. Soon, he would leave the wild behind and walk the roads of Uruk. And when he did, the world would tremble as the clash of gods and men began. One day, as Enkidu roamed the wilderness, his presence did not go unnoticed. Hunters, men of Uruk, watched from a distance, astonished and terrified. This was no ordinary man. He ran beside the gazelles, drank from the same streams as the beasts, and wrestled lions with his bare hands. Fearing that this wild man would upset the balance of their hunting grounds, the hunters rushed back to Uruk. They sought the counsel of the high priests, who in turn brought their concerns before King Gilgamesh himself. The king, intrigued rather than threatened, did not see Enkidu as a danger, but as a challenge. Upon hearing of the wild man, Gilgamesh was not angered but intrigued. A creature as strong as him, roaming free beyond the walls of Uruk? He saw not a threat, but a challenge. Rather than sending warriors, the high priests devised another plan. Enkidu knew nothing of men, nothing of their desires, their pleasures, their ways. To sever him from the wild, they would not use force but temptation. And so they sent Shamhat, a priestess of Inanna, to the wilderness. Her presence alone would change the course of fate. Deep in the untamed land, Enkidu's world was about to be undone. As Enkidu stood at the river's edge, something shifted. The wilderness, once his home, now felt distant. The beasts watched him differently, sensing the change before he did. Before him, Shamhat stood still, neither prey nor predator. She did not run, did not challenge, only waited. For the first time, Enkidu hesitated. Drawn by something unknown, he took a step forward. The earth beneath him no longer felt the same. Fate had taken hold. His world would never be the same. As Enkidu stepped forward, leaving behind the world of the wild, Shamhat guided him gently toward civilization. Over days, she introduced him to the ways of men, food, drink, and the warmth of human touch. The more he embraced this new life, the more the wilderness seemed to reject him. The beasts that once ran beside him now fled at his presence. He was no longer one of them. With time, he heard of Gilgamesh, the mighty king of Uruk, a ruler feared by his people. Anger stirred within Enkidu at the tales of Gilgamesh's cruelty, his arrogance, his unchecked power, his disregard for the weak. The wild heart inside him refused to bow. Driven by fate and defiance, Enkidu entered Uruk, the city of kings, determined to put an end to Gilgamesh's tyranny. The gods had created him as a force of balance, and now that balance would be tested in the clash of two titans. Enkidu and Gilgamesh faced each other in the halls of Uruk. No words, only the weight of a challenge unspoken. They clashed, two titans shaking the palace walls. Stone cracked beneath their feet, dust filled the air. Blow for blow, neither yielded. But Gilgamesh was stronger. With one final maneuver, he overpowered Enkidu. The wild man lay beneath him, breath heavy, his strength spent. Yet in defeat, there was no shame, only respect. From that day, they were no longer rivals. They became brothers. Restless for adventure, Gilgamesh and Enkidu set out to slay Humbaba, the monstrous guardian of the cedar forest, seeking eternal fame. Deep in the sacred forest, Humbaba emerged, his scales like bronze, eyes burning with fire, his voice shaking the earth. The winds howled at his command, but Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood firm. The battle was fierce. Blades clashed, roars echoed, the ground trembled. Humbaba fought like a god, but the two warriors struck together, their strength unmatched. At last, they overpowered him. Humbaba fell, begging for mercy, but the gods had spoken. With one final blow, they severed his head. Returning to Uruk, their victory was celebrated. Among the cheering crowds, Ishtar watched. She desired Gilgamesh and offered him power, wealth, and immortality. But Gilgamesh refused, and the goddess's smile faded, replaced by wrath. Humiliated by Gilgamesh's rejection, Ishtar ascended to the heavens, demanding vengeance from her father, Anu. When he hesitated, she threatened to unleash the dead upon the living. The gods relented, and in their judgment, they sent the bull of heaven. The divine beast descended upon Uruk, its hooves splitting the earth, its breath withering crops, and its charge crushing men like dust. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood their ground. The battle was fierce, the beast unstoppable, but together they struck it down. With one final blow, Enkidu seized its horns, and Gilgamesh delivered the fatal strike. The bull collapsed and Uruk cheered, but the gods did not. That night, the gods passed their judgment. One of them must die. Enkidu fell ill. His strength faded as fever burned through his body. For days he lay weak, knowing his fate was sealed. Before his final breath, he looked to Gilgamesh, his voice a whisper. Even the mighty must fall. And then he was gone. For the first time, Gilgamesh, the warrior without fear, felt true terror, the fear of death. After Enkidu's death, Gilgamesh was consumed by fear. If even the strongest could fall, what hope was there for him? Determined to escape death, he abandoned his kingdom, seeking Utnapishtim, the only man granted eternal life by the gods. The journey beyond the world. Gilgamesh traveled across scorching deserts and towering mountains until he reached the Tunnel of the Sun, a passage through absolute darkness. For 12 days and nights, he walked alone, emerging into the Garden of the Gods, where trees bore jewels instead of fruit. The ferryman and the waters of death. At the edge of the world, Siduri, a divine innkeeper, warned him, "No mortal can escape death." But Gilgamesh did not turn back. With the help of Urshanabi, the ferryman, he crossed the waters of death, finally reaching Utnapishtim. When Gilgamesh demanded the secret of eternal life, Utnapishtim only sighed. "The gods chose me. You, Gilgamesh, are meant to live and die as all men do." But seeing his despair, he offered him one final hope. At the bottom of the sea lies a plant that restores youth. If you seek to defy death, dive and claim it. Without hesitation, Gilgamesh plunged into the depths, emerging victorious with the flower of immortality in his grasp. On his journey home, he rested by a cool spring, exhausted. As he slept, a serpent emerged, devouring the flower in an instant. When he awoke, it was gone. The gift he had suffered for, lost in a moment. For a long time he was silent. Then he laughed, bitterly but with understanding. He returned to Uruk, not as an immortal, but as a wise king. It is not eternity that gives life meaning, but the moments we live.